morning, Laguna Woods. Thanks for tuning in again, and we're going to continue today with the inspirational story of Greg Outlaw, whose life has been lived at two huge extremes, from just basically in the gutter, drug-wise, and doing very bad things, to the other extreme, which we're going to get to. So hang in there. It's the story of a life change. We're going to use the same verse for today, Colossians 3 at verse 13. Forgive as the Lord forgave us. We had a great story of forgiveness yesterday, but Greg experienced it again in a mighty way in today's episode. He moves back to California, continues to show greed and self-centeredness in his life in a mighty way. So listen to what Greg has to say today.
And so the pain continued on, and it got worse. We ended up moving from South Carolina to Southern California. Candy's family was there. The only thing I didn't like necessarily was her brother was a Christian, and I didn't have any real friends that were Christians because, they're lying hypocrites. Can't trust them. Around 1995, Candy and Corey, who was my brother-in-law now, we decided to start a new company. It's a .com company, and this was right when the internet was growing big, and we're like one of the first 10,000 websites on the internet, and now 10,000 are being created like every day. And we start getting attention, and people start talking to us, and then we get some seed capital that comes in, and so all of a sudden we're making great salaries. I mean, we had people that were offering us, it started with $10 million for our company, and I think the largest offer we got that we turned down was $25 million. And at that time there was only 3 of us that had stock. I mean, you're talking a lot of money, and Candy and I basically had controlling ownership of this company, but I wanted it all. A millionaire, a multimillionaire was not enough. I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted it all. And we're caught up in that world of power. And then the next thing I know, it's starting to crumble again because I'm still doing drugs. I'm still drinking every night. I would go to bed drunk. I would wake up still drunk. I would get stoned at night. In between, during the day, I'd be popping Vicodin and pills and Valium and everything else to get through the day. And then I started doing cocaine. And I carry a little bullet of cocaine so I could, get my ups and my downs. And it totally changed me and who I was. And I was still abusing Candy. And she was, I think, at this point in time, I'm not sure she had a lot of love for me left, as much as she was looking for the bailout too. Well, as soon as the company goes, and boom, we could split and be done. Well, through this period of time, we also started to have a lot of problems, Corey and I, fighting for the reins of the company. And so I'm becoming, in my manipulative ways, I decided to set him up. I got Candy to actually go in there and fire her own brother and take away his stock. And his stock would have been worth, I don't know, $8 million if we just sold it for $25 million, and we just stole it from him. Just like that. It was right after that I go into the hospital for what's called a pancreatic attack. Through years of drug and alcohol abuse, I developed acute pancreatitis. And every once in a while I'd go in the hospital with an attack. An attack was really painful. What would happen during an attack is right after a big, huge binge night or something like that, I would go and eat the next day, and the pancreas would be swollen so much that the tubes were swollen shut. And so the enzymes would actually be activated on the inside of the pancreas. I mean, it would eat you from the inside out. I mean, it's incredibly painful. You go in the hospital for like 2 or 3 weeks. They pump you on tons of morphine, which at that point in time I thought, dude, that's kind of break even. But I had a lot of these attacks, and they started escalating in intensity and frequency. Doc goes, Greg, we need to talk. You've gotten to the place there's just nothing else we can do for you. And I said, what do you mean nothing you can do for me? And he just looks at me and he goes, well, you're terminal. What do you mean I'm going to die? And I said, well, how long? 3, 4, at the most 5 years? 3 or 4 or 5? You're saying I'm going to die in 3 or 4 or 5 years? And you can't even tell me when, and you can't do anything about it? And I felt this rage kind of well up in me. I started ripping out the IVs and everything else, and I said, well, what do I need you, Doc? And I got mad, and I called a taxi cab, and I went to my drug dealer in Newport Beach, and I bought $2,000 worth of cocaine. And I did all of it in about 35 days. I mean, I'm just trying to do anything just to numb the pain. And I get so paranoid with what's going on. I think every black car in the world is a government agent chasing me, trying to steal my company. You know, I'm just like freaking out. But finally, I came to the end of myself. And I was so wrapped up in the drugs and the confusion and everything else that I finally just fell on my knees. And I cried out to God. But I heard, call Corey. I didn't have any other Christian friends because I didn't hang out with a bunch of lying hypocrites. That was me. Here's what was running through my head. If I call Corey, I'm just going to get an earful of how I just stole everything from him and what are you calling me for and everything else. And I decided to pick up the phone and I called him. And I called him and I said, Corey, I'm dying. And I'm addicted to cocaine and a bunch of other drugs. And I need your help. All he said was, I'll be right there. And he came and he just hugged me. And I just broke in his arms. I just cried and I wept and asked his forgiveness and told him how sorry I was. And he took me to church. It just happened to be that night that a class was going on. And I don't know if you know what a 12-step study is, but it's kind of like that, except it's Christ-centered. And so it came my turn to share, and I started confessing sins as far back as I could. You know, I said, I did this wrong. You know, I judged the church. I judged my dad. You know, and I started confessing these things. And I couldn't stop. It took like, you know, an hour to confess 19 years worth of sin. I felt so light. I felt so, I don't know, so clean, spiritually healed of these things. I couldn't explain it. And so I rededicated my life to Christ before those men that day. I had perfect peace in my heart for the first time in 19 years.
Isn't that something? And he finally gets to the point he's hitting rock bottom. And he can't go on. And what's his response? Call Corey, his partner, because he knew he was a follower of Christ. He knew he was a Christian. But can you imagine? Call Corey. Corey is who Greg had cheated out of millions of dollars. The resentment, the anger that he must have had toward Greg. But Corey comes. Corey comes. And what's he say? He says, I'll be right there. No hesitation. And he takes and he hugs Greg and he takes him to church. That church was Saddleback Church. And they went to a thing that we call Celebrate Recovery. And finally, Greg was getting his life right with Christ. And he says, for the first time, I had perfect peace in my life. That is the power of Christ. But the story's not over, and you're not going to believe what happens to Greg in the next episode. Tune in tomorrow. Please don't miss tomorrow. See you then.